Hello, my name is Melissa Sandoval, and today I will be presenting a lecture on the attitudes and public opinion towards capital punishment. According to Pew Research Center, public support for the death penalty continues to decline sharply, particularly in more recent years, over the past 2 decades. Here are 2 of the most recent national polls, including historical trend findings. Pew Research Center polls conducted in August and September of 2016 cite that only about half of Americans, 49%, favor the death penalty for people convicted of murder, while 42% oppose it. This is a drop of 7 percentage points since March 2015, when 56% were in favor, and 31 percentage points since 1994, when 80% were. Note, during this time, public support for capital punishment peaked. 8 in 10 Americans favored the death penalty, and fewer than 2 in 10, 16%, opposed it. Whereas Gallup organization polls conducted in October of 2016 cite that 60% of Americans say they are in favor of the death penalty for persons convicted of murder, down from 66% support between 2000 and 2010, and the all-time high of 80% in 1994. They cite that support for the death penalty has not been lower since 1972, when 57% were in favor of it and 32% were opposed. What is the reason for this sharp but steady decline? Are Americans deeply concerned about the risk of executing the innocent, about the fairness of the process and the inability of capital punishment to accomplish its basic purpose, as our book states? Walker, Spohn, and DeLone suggest that attitudes are determined not only by individual characteristics, including race and ethnicity, but also by the characteristics of the communities in which people live. They note that people who live in areas with high homicide rates, in politically conservative jurisdictions, or in areas with higher percentages of African Americans in the population are more likely to support the death penalty. However, research has concluded that in states who support the death penalty, homicide rates continue to be higher than in states who oppose it. According to Death Penalty Information Center's Executive Director Robert Dunham, whether it's concerns about innocence, costs, discrimination, availability of life without parole as a safe alternative, or the questionable way in which states are attempting to carry out executions, the public grows increasingly uncomfortable with the death penalty each year. The public appears to be more concerned with morality issues, costs, and whether the death penalty reduces crime or not. In a 2015 National Pew Research Center survey, 61%, about 6 in 10 adults, said that the death penalty does not deter people from committing serious crimes. Empirical research and studies have shown this to be true. Per a 2009 study published in the Journal of Criminal Law and Criminology and the DPIC, 88% of criminologists do not believe the death penalty is an effective deterrent to homicide. The study notes that answers to the survey were not based on criminologists' personal opinions, but rather on their understandings of empirical research. Also, with the advent of DNA testing and the work by the Innocence Project, the public is growing more aware of the racial injustices/wrongful convictions that have taken place. In the same survey conducted 2 years ago, 71%, about 7 in 10 adults, said that there is some risk that an innocent person will be put to death. This included 84% of those who oppose the death penalty and 63% of those who support. More Americans are choosing to support life in prison without the possibility of parole instead, because it provides swift, severe, and certain punishment, justice to survivors of murder victims, and allows more resources to be invested into solving other murders and preventing violence, according to a 2015 article by the ACLU. As of today, the death penalty is legal and used in 31 states, though executions are rare, except in states like Georgia and Texas. The shortage of lethal injection drugs has also led to the decline in executions, as well as the growing reluctance of juries to sentence defendants to death. The death penalty is also used by the U.S. federal government and the military. Some states and legislators have voted to abolish it due to it being unconstitutional. Supreme courts have also held that some states' capital sentencing procedures were unconstitutional and have struck them down. Said by Supreme Court Justice Stephen Breyer, defendants who face death sentences are not society's worst criminals, but are chosen at random, on the basis perhaps of geography, perhaps on the views of the individual prosecutors, or still worse, on the basis of race. Lastly, per a Washington Post story released last September, even though the polls show that support for the death penalty is declining, there are still some groups of Americans that are more likely to back it up. These groups are men, 55%, older people, 51% of those ages 30 and up, white people, 57%, Republicans, 72%, and those without a college degree, 51%. Comparably, only 43% of women, 29% of African Americans, 36% of Hispanics, 34% of Democrats, the highest decline in support, 44% of independents, and 43% of college graduates favor the death penalty. This data comes from a 2016 Pew Research Center survey conducted on August 23rd through September 2nd. By the looks of it, this trend may continue, but ultimately only time will tell. Thank you for listening.